Go to TAPgiles.com to learn dreams, engage my services, and support the channel. So I made a quick bit of logic where this is just a demo scene, and if I press X, it knows if you are pressing it for a single tap or double tap, and you can and it all kind of just works. So I think what I'll do is I'll just delete the single tap, double tap thing. It's just like one chip that you can use. It's a separate element if you want to use it. So I'll just delete that part and then remake the rest. This is just emitting those messages. We've got a chip and we'll put a node in it and we'll bring in X so that we know when you press X. And we want to do stuff when we first press X. We don't care if we're holding it or whatever. So I'm going to put in a signal manipulator and turn it into a pulse, which means when you go from not pressing X 1 minute to pressing X or holding X the next minute, at that moment you get a pulse, and we can like trigger logic with it. If you wanted just the single tap, then you could just wire this straight into the single tap emitter, and every time you press it then it would do the thing. But if I tap really quickly, it's not saying that we've got a double tap, so let's make that logic, and I'll just remove that. I'm going to emit an object every time we press X, and if two of those objects were emitted within a certain time frame, we'll count that as a double tap. So first let's make an object. For now, I'll just make a chip and group them up. And this lets us emit that as a group. So if I get an emitter, I can click on that and then click on the thing we want to emit. And now if you just play time, it will emit those that bit of logic. Now the thing that we want to emit has disappeared because it powers off automatically when you make it the target of an emitter. Let's go to show and hide and turn off preview invisibility so we can see that stuff that's turned off. So now we can change the logic without having to unlink the emitter or anything. So if we go like that, we need to set this to once mode. So now when we press X, every time we press X, it emits a new one of those. But we want to know only if it's emitted within a certain amount of time. So if we go in here and we don't care how many is emitted. If we change the emitted object lifetime to 1 second, and then we emit one, then 1 second later it disappears. And if we emit two, they'll each destroy themselves after that amount of time. So when the first one is emitted, then we have 1 second for another one to be emitted before that one dies. So if two of them exist, they must have been emitted within 1 second of each other. So we're going to use that to say how quickly you need to tap X twice. So if we just make that 0.3 too late, then it won't be like a double tap. There won't be two at the same time. If we push it really fast, then there were two at the same time. So we need to just know if there are two at the same time and then do some stuff, trigger some logic. There's a few ways of doing it. I'll do it the simple way first, simplest to explain first. So first let's try using a trigger zone and just putting a tag in here and detecting that. So P for press, and we'll detect the tag P, and in the scene we don't care where it is. Cool, so it's detecting, but we want to set this to 2, and now this will only say that it's detected if there are two at the same time. If we look at the face of this, it will become black if we double tap, and if we just press it once, it won't. So now we know if we have done a double tap or not. And if we have, what do we want to do? We want to send a signal out, like that, to emit that double tap message, like that. But now if we plug this back in, the single tap also triggers, because that triggers instantly, and then the double tap waits until the second one and then triggers. We need to make sure the player hasn't pressed X again within that time frame that we are setting here, and then we know that they definitely haven't done a double tap, they've only done a single tap, and we could send that signal out. For that, I'm going to use a timer. Get a timer. When we press it, then we want to go for that same amount of time. So let's just have a value slider, and this is how long it takes us to do a double tap. So let's wire that in there, and let's have the same amount of time in here. So that was 0.3 seconds. So if we press it, then that takes 0.3 seconds, and then it sends out a signal. So if we did it from there, so the single tap waited until it went through. Now if we do a double tap, the single tap's still triggered, but we don't want it to do that. So when we know that we've double tapped, we want to reset that timer so that it doesn't finish and send out the signal that we've single tapped. So now if we go single tap, that's fine. If we double tap, it only does the double tap. But you can see when I double tap, those objects are still there. If I kind of triple tap, if we make that bigger, if I triple tap, then it can think that we're like double tapping over and over, and then it's kind of blocking it and all this kind of stuff we don't want to happen. We want it to everything reset once we double tap. So if you wire that into destroy emitted objects, now when we double tap, it will forget that we did anything at all, and it will just send those triggering signals out. So it'll only double tap, but it will let us keep on double tapping. And if we single tap, then that's working fine. So I'll just put that back down to 0.3. So you will have a delay, but this is just kind of what is required for a double tap or double click. There's always this added delay to allow the computer to know that you've actually double tapped and not just single tapped. So that's how you do that. The way I do it is slightly different. So instead of using a tag and trigger zone, that would require you, if you wanted to do double tap for circle as well, you wouldn't just copy the chip and the object to emit. You'd have to change the names as well so that it doesn't interfere with each other. So another way of doing it is to kind of take an average of how many things have been emitted, which sounds complicated, but it's actually quite easy to do, maybe not to explain though, so we'll find out. So easiest way of explaining it is to use a node, and if we grabbed a switch, and I'll make a value slider to show us what value we're actually getting. So if we wire that into there, if we wired an on switch, it will give us a 1, and another one, it would also give us a 1. If we made that blend with L1 and X on here, you have these different wire blend modes, and blend, the type blend is it averages the wires coming in. So if one's on and one's off, then you add them all up, so it's 0 plus 1 is 1, and then you divide it by the number of wires, so that's 2. So it's 1 over 2 is a half. And if you add another one, it would be 2 over 3, which is 2/3. So you know how many of these on switches exist going into that node by this value that comes out the other side. So if we said, is this more than 0.5? Like that, and I'll just use a switch so that we can see if that's saying it is or not. Then when there's only one existing, then it won't say that, so that it's not more than 0.5. And if there's 2 existing, then it will say it is. So then we could wire that into the output. So if we just set that one up, but the key is to have this off one, because if you had just the one that we emitted, which was on, then it will be 1. If we emitted another one that was on, then these are all 1. These are all the same number, so they'll average out to the same number, and we won't get any useful information from this no matter how many we emit. But if we have one that's off, then this value will change depending on how many exist. And that's what we're using. So if we put that into there, tweak the emitter to make sure it's going to emit with wires. So when a new one is emitted, it will add this wire coming into this node. Then when we play and emit some stuff, you can see that value changing. And if we go, I'll just delete the trigger zone so that isn't affected, make this longer. So when I press it just once, we only get 0.5, and twice we get 0.67. And we can see if this lights up only once or twice, and then it does light up. So you do the same thing and wire that into destroy it all, and that should also reset there. Yeah, we need to wire into there. There we go. If we use that instead, that should help. Yeah. So we should use the signal manipulator pulse thing going into this. Otherwise, we might still be holding X from when we started to press it, and then that kind of makes sure that this only happens when you first press it instead of it's constantly trying to play as you hold X. So you could do that, and you could do the averaging like that. If you didn't want these wires trailing around the place, because you can kind of see it's making these wires, you can actually do this as well using a keyframe. So if we had a value slider, let's just remove that, and we had a keyframe that sets it to 0, and another keyframe that sets it to 100%, and then we turn this one on for 0, turn this one on for 100%, and it actually averages out over all the keyframes affecting this value. And if we added another one, then that's the 2/3 value, and then it's going higher and higher as more exist. So we know how many exist by what this value slider is saying. So if we just put that in there and use this in exactly the same way, then that should all work fine as well. Double tap and single tap, and put that down to 3 again, 0.3, double tap and single tap. That's all working fine. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something interesting. Go to patreon.com/TAPgiles to learn something new every day.